And now for our main program, we've asked Cindy Runger to make the introductions. Cindy.
Fellow Rotarians and guests, I am privileged to work alongside an extraordinary colleague, Phyllis Campbell, Chair of the Pacific Northwest for JPMorgan Chase. Phyllis has many admirers, and without a doubt, it's because at every step of her career, she has garnered phenomenal bottom-line results while also embodying the philosophy, the more you give, the more you get back. You may already know her unique story. The daughter of a Japanese father who was interned during World War II, she moved from her humble Spokane beginnings, working in the family dry cleaning business, to becoming the first woman CEO of a Washington State bank. Under her direction at U.S. Bank, it doubled in size. She then took the helm of the Seattle Foundation, where she doubled the giving budget in just a few years. And in 2009, Jamie Dimon created the perfect role for her, combining her banking executive acumen with her passion for building community. Now she's running a great bank, creating jobs, and supporting local giving, while also mentoring and serving on boards like Alaska Air, Nordstrom, and Path. She does all of this with such a quiet, authoritative calmness that I'm convinced there are four of her. But there are not, so please welcome the one and only Phyllis Campbell.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Cindy and President Laura and Rotarians. Let me just take this first opportunity to thank all you Rotarians. Cindy mentioned the giving back and building community, and Rotary is such the epitome, really, of giving back. I loved hearing the stories of how Peru and Seattle interconnect to really make a difference in the world. So in this new year, let me just say thank you. And as we start the new year, I really wanted to just use the opportunity in talking with your program chair, Mark, to talk about leadership in changing times, because I think it's a good point to reflect as we head into the new year. You know, what is changing, and what are some things about leadership that we might all remind ourselves? And I was reminded by Cindy that Mark has a perfect record of great programs all year. So no pressure, Mark, I'll try not to break your streak here. But I'm going to start with a couple of personal stories to amplify a little bit of what Cindy already talked about in her introduction, and then lead into three trends that are on my mind as I think about this coming year, and then just recap really some of the personal leadership lessons that hopefully will have some take-home value for you. Well, let me start with story one. It is a little bit of what Cindy already foreshadowed, and that's a story called True Grit. Well, I've really been fortunate to count so many mentors, many in this room, by the way, in my life and career. But the very first mentor for me was my father. And he was what Rich Karlgaard, who you may know as a writer for Fortune magazine, described as an example of true grit. And Rich Karlgaard described in his article, true grit as, and I quote, someone who overcame obstacles through hard work, perseverance, and resilience. Well, as Cindy said, you know, I grew up in Spokane, Washington, and we were, post-World War II, we were one of the very few minority families in that community. And I remember my parents telling us, you know, work hard, similar to Tuya's story, I was inspired by that, you know, study hard, really improve your circumstances, because really we did have a lot of adversity growing up. My parents told us of stories in the house we grew up in where the neighbors circulated a petition to basically keep them out of the neighborhood. And yet in spite of that, you know, they persisted and they persevered to become a part of the community with a great community and family and church to surround us. But I think my father's story really is the one that I did want to share, so Cindy, thanks for foreshadowing that. And many of you are very aware here in Seattle of the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. And my father's story was not unique, by the way, because there were many in this room who have similar stories. But West Coast Japanese Americans during the war, by order of the government, were basically taken off of the West Coast. My father's family had a little grocery store up here on Capitol Hill by Seattle University. And so they were taken, but just before they were taken to Puyallup to be interned in Idaho and North Dakota, they had about 48 hours to sell their business. So my father's older brother actually got him out to Spokane to go finish high school, so he got him inland. So my father actually did not have to go to the camp. But in spite of all of this, my father finished high school in Spokane, and he decided to enroll in the U.S. Army. And so I was really inspired listening to his quiet story about the fact that his father told him before he was taken to camp, you are a U.S. citizen. You fight for this country. You get the benefits of this country, and you fight for your country. So in spite of his own relatives being interned in these camps, he enrolled in the U.S. Army. And he, along with his unit, the 442nd, became really famous. Many of you are aware of their history. They were the unit of the Japanese Americans who were in similar circumstances that did enroll and fought in the European theater and really took some of the worst casualties during the war. So I really have always thought about this story, and I thought the true grit phrase was such a great story because it wasn't just the story of rising above odds, but it was a real story to me of patriotism. So I've never stopped being inspired by this whole group of patriots who really did fight for the country and really fought for a cause greater than self. Okay, my second quick story is called Get Ready. Some of you have heard me talk about this, but it's such a central part of who I am that I really want to share it with you. This story was a phrase of a business mentor of mine, a guy named Gary Cameron, that some of you may know. He was the former CEO of U.S. Bank. But the quick story was, he always used to say to me, Phyllis, get ready. I'd say, get ready for what? And he'd say, I don't know, just get ready. Well, what he was talking about was really the fact that you never know what's around the corner. And he would always push me to think about the next, vista or the next, plateau in my life and career. And so he just promoted me. My husband and I moved from Spokane to Seattle. I was just promoted to one of the biggest jobs I ever had in my life, running the retail branch system for the bank. And he said to me, calls me up to his office and said, so Phyllis, what do you want to do next? I said, what do I want to do next? I have the biggest job I've ever had in my life, Gary. I don't know. I really feel like I've really achieved a new, the new heights in my career. And he said, well, we're going to sit here a long time because you remember what I've told you. I said, I know. Get ready. So I thought I've got to tell him something. So he was the president of U.S. Bank at the time, and Bill Sperling is smiling because he knows him. But he said, so I said, Gary, I can't think of anything, so how about your job? And I thought, that was maybe a little audacious. But I couldn't think of anything. So he laughed a little bit. And I said, in a couple of years. And we parted company and shook hands. 2 weeks later, literally 2 weeks later, he called and said, do you remember that conversation we had in my office? Well, you are the new president of U.S. Bank of Washington. And I have to tell you that I was shocked and I was scared. I really didn't think that I could even do something like this. But he said, Phyllis, you are ready. And I think really his point, and my reason for telling you this story, is, we never know what door's going to open in our life. I never expected that door would open. We certainly don't know what doors might close in our life or what new opportunities might be around the bend. So Gary's Get Ready is really was saying to me, and I still stay in touch with him today, is, just get ready because change is constant and change is unpredictable. And one really has to be mentally, emotionally, spiritually ready for whatever is around the corner, and then be willing to take the risk to succeed. So as I look back on my recent career opportunities that Cindy mentioned, I guess I really have to say, there were so many opportunities that I've been given that I didn't expect. I didn't goal set for, I didn't expect. And as a woman and a minority in the business world, it always hasn't been easy. I've been turned down for promotions. Doors haven't always opened that easily. But my mentors have helped me so much. And at the end, what my mentors have said to me is the door can open, but if you're not willing to take a personal risk to step through that door, you really aren't going to be successful in the end. And by the way, you might risk failure. So I think part of it was just the ability and the encouragement to not just get ready, but then once you're ready to step through the door and take that risk. So as an example, the job that Cindy mentioned, taking the CEO of the Seattle Foundation, and I've worked with several people in this room, was probably a good example of one of my most out-of-the-box jobs. I'd never run a nonprofit. It wasn't even in my, my experience set to think, radar screen. This was something I really didn't think I would ever do. I was on the board and, really had a passion for the Seattle Foundation and its mission. But when, again, the opportunity came along, I realized as I talked to more and more people said, with your business experience and your passion for community, it really is the perfect time. And it isn't a big risk. There's a fantastic team, a fantastic board. Just step into it and do it. And it really was something that I have to say again, it was scary to take the risk. But with a great team and a great mission and a great community, obviously, I realized I got to stretch a lot. I learned a lot, probably a lot more than I ever gave, and it was a great, great experience for 5+ years. Well, Cindy said, my current job is also an example of another get ready, because again, I was enjoying the Seattle Foundation in my 5th year of running things when, unfortunately for this community, WAMU failed, which was a little over 5 years ago. And I got that call from Jamie's office to say, Jamie Dimon, to say, we need you in this community. We really need your banking experience, your community experience. And I just said, no, I really didn't see that. And I said, I really don't see this. I'm enjoying the Seattle Foundation. And I literally gave him a couple of names, probably a couple of people in this room. So, I said, there are a lot of great people in this community, but, I really have had a great career in banking, and I'm not going back, even though I admired JPMorgan Chase and Jamie Dimon and Steve Kutz, who I'd met, and a number of people. I wasn't interested, but I kept hearing Gary's voice, get ready, get ready. And after a long process of really thinking about the importance of having a great bank in this community, a bank that gives back to the community, a global bank, I really felt it was important to make sure that we had that connection to the community. So I did say yes, and I think as Cindy reflected, I'm so fortunate to work with great colleagues like Cindy and some of my colleagues at this table over here, because really, I think I look back on the 5 years and I really feel good about the fact that we have folks every day that endeavor to do the right thing here, that really build our business and really connect, moreover, with our customers and our community. So as a company, and if you want to talk about it in the Q&A, that's great. We've had a lot of our share of headlines for sure. We've made mistakes for sure. But through it all, I have to say we've been transparent, we've taken accountability, and we've learned a lot. So these are a couple of stories, I guess I would say, that I think really illustrate the true grit and the get ready, which I think really have, in the end, formed my leadership style. And I really hope that, as I'm talking up here, that it causes you to reflect, as you've written on your cards up there, a little bit about your own story, but how your own story informs, your mission and purpose for 2014. So let me turn quickly now to 3 trends that are on my mind as we head into the new year. Okay, trend number 1, higher expectations of business and organizations. Well, there's no question that whether you look at the Edelman Global Trust Barometer or you look at any really poll, particularly of Americans today, society's expectations of leaders, of institutions, are going up dramatically. And the 2 characteristics that are at the top of every survey that people say are the most important characteristics if I'm going to do business with an institution are trust and transparency. So I really have to look at the trust barometer, and I kind of looked at the data, and I think a new one's due to come out in a couple of weeks. Unfortunately, as you would guess, banks are right at the bottom. However, we're not at the very bottom. There's good news there. We slightly notch above the politicians, so that's good news, but so be it. Well, so the trust barometer really talks about three things that we need to think about as leaders of institutions, because I think they're really important for all of us, whether in business or in the professions. First of all, people that have answered the trust barometer have said, first of all, do what you say you're going to do. I mean, that seems obvious, but it really is very much of that's really what forms the basis for trust. Second thing is execute well on your mission, especially as it relates to customer service, especially as it relates to service and your products and how you back them up. And then the third thing was, which is something we think about, if you mess up, admit it, step up to it, learn your lessons, but be very, again, transparent. And that word keeps coming back over and over again. So I think, net, certainly as I reflect about banks and our bank in particular, we are really focused on this. Do the right thing, do things right, because it really is collective actions, and it will take time, but I think by actions that really inform the trust, are informed by trust and transparency, that score will go up. Okay, so that's trend one, higher expectations. Trend two is one that affects all of us in this room, and that's the increasing workforce skills gap. I know we have a couple of my esteemed educator CEOs here in Jean Floten of WGU and Joe Wakefield of the community college system, and so many others. But I think that if you ask so many people in this community, what's the biggest issue on your mind, the first issue is education, but then it's linked to the fact that we have so many jobs that can't be filled. And so just a quick statistic, the Boston Consulting Group did a quick benchmarking survey in our Puget Sound region about 9 months ago. And what they found was in the major employers, we right now have 24,000 jobs that are unfilled as we sit here today, in spite of the fact that we have underemployed and unemployed folks here. So the jobs are, though, in, guess what, STEM-related healthcare fields. So I think that it just calls all of us to think if we do nothing differently, Boston Consulting Group said the gap will double in the next 5 years. So just one small way, our way of helping in this, we at JPMorgan Chase just announced a $250 million 5-year national initiative called New Skills at Work. So, one of our focuses is just this. We want to help close the gaps. We want to help work with the most effective nonprofits nationally and education systems to really ask how we can make sure that the underemployed, unemployed, folks in our country, our youth especially, are reconnecting their skills to the relevant jobs that are out in our economy. So again, I think that there's so many great things in this room that are already going on, but it is a large national problem. And one example of a nonprofit that we're working with nationally is Year Up. They've got a great Seattle chapter. I'm on the advisory board, as are several others, but it really will take all of our great efforts to address this gap, which is really not just in this community, but it is certainly nationwide. So workforce skills gap. Trend number 3 is diversity. And I really I'm going to say just a very little bit about this, but it is something as we sit here in 2014. I really have to say I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed that we don't see more diversity at the top ranks of business and the professions. One example I would give you, and I follow this statistic closely, are women on corporate boards. So that's just one snippet of the issue. As we sit here today in the United States, only 17% of all Fortune 500 companies' boards are women. And that ranks below many countries in Europe and even in some countries in Asia, which is really interesting. But I think the thing that I have to say is that statistic has been absolutely flat for the last 5 years. In spite of all of the talk, in spite of the great diversity we see here, it really is something where I really have to sit back and say, we really as a nation, I think, need to sit down and think about diversity as a competitive advantage. It's at least from my observation, great management, great diverse management teams, great diverse boards, really demonstrate innovation and I think ultimately success. So it's just something to think about, and as we think about these trends, they really are just things that I've been thinking about as we move into the new year. There's many I know you could add to this list. So my goal today really was to share a couple stories, talk about a couple of trends, and let me close, and I'd love to have your comments or questions with, again, just recapping the 3 leadership lessons that I want to leave you with. And again, they're ones that have been important to me, and hopefully one will resonate with you. So the first one, again, just to repeat myself, is get ready. But what I want to do is quote Gary Burnison, who just wrote a brand new book called Lead. He's the CEO of Korn Ferry, and it's a great quote he has in here. And he said, and I quote, "Thanks to the ever-increasing velocity of changes in today's endlessly interconnected world, the immediate future holds more threats and more opportunities than any time in history," end quote. So I think the question under the Get Ready leadership theme is, what is our role as leaders in being ready? Well, leadership lesson number 2, I already mentioned it, true grit. But as I said earlier, I think true grit is about perseverance and resilience. And I think about the number of things that have happened to me in my life, the setbacks, the mistakes, in some cases maybe failures. I really look back and see them all as opportunities to really learn. And so the best leaders that I observe are the leaders that are not just resilient, but out of it, a mistake or a setback, they emerge better. They're more optimistic. They really adjust, and they really move on with greater strength and force. And I quote John Wooden, who's somebody I actually met a number of years ago when we had the Final Four here in Seattle, and I talked to him, and so I like his one quote. He sums up true grit by saying, "Success is never final. Failure is never fatal. It's courage that counts." So the last lesson, and it's a little bit of what I've already discussed and what you heard of in Tuya's story, which I loved, is turn obstacles and questions into opportunity. So, I think it is one thing to bounce back from setbacks, but I think the main thing is to really think about setbacks, which we all have, and think about questions that we all have, of whether it's the economy, whether it's, changes in political leadership, whatever it is. But I think taking those questions and challenges and really turning them into productive questions like, what's happening that informs a different future? Or how do we adjust course? We may have thought we're going down this road, but we've got to adjust course, and if we do, how? And then how does my role as a leader fit here? And I really observe and love to watch successful people who do this well. They take those changing circumstances, bounce back from the setbacks, and then really end up maybe altering course, but it always results in better opportunity, or maybe even a greater innovation somewhere along the line. So as we move into 2014, I just think it's a great time to reflect on our own leadership opportunities. I thank Mark and President Laura for the opportunity to do this today. But I really also encourage us to think about what are the doors we're opening for others, and also what are the causes to which we're devoting ourselves. I'm a real optimist, and I'm an optimist especially about this community. We have so many things, the spirit of generosity, the civic mindedness of this community. Rotary is a great example, innovation. And in that context, it's up to each one of us, I think, as leaders, to call on our best selves as people who care, to step forward to address the challenges and opportunities ahead. We are ready. So thank you, and I would love to have some questions. Hi,
Phyllis,
Ron.
hi.
Happy New Year.
Thank you very much for being with us today. As you talked about being ready to be president of the bank when you were not only a double minority, but being young, maybe qualify for triple.
And short. So got it all going.
Well, and beautiful. I'm reminded of a story I've heard you tell about the reaction you got when you were, as president of the bank, were on a trade mission to Japan.
All right, I'll just quickly tell the story, and that was we were with the Seattle Chamber, the inner city visits, and we were in Osaka and with a business roundtable, and we were sitting at a table similar to this, and we exchanged business cards, and the gentleman from one of the Japanese corporations kept talking to my husband over across me and kept saying, how's the economy? And then he said, how's the banking business? Well, my husband, being a quick guy, said, I think he means to talk to my wife. So he said, I think you really want to talk to my wife. And he picked up my card and said, oh, I'm so sorry, I don't understand how a person of your, and he couldn't think of anything, so he said age, but said age could be the president of this bank. Does your father own the bank? So that's my story.
Ms. Campbell back here. Thank you so much for your presentation. Going back to that day you got that call to become president, let's fast forward a day. If you got a call tomorrow with a special new opportunity, what would be the scariest opportunity you could hear tomorrow?
Wow. Boy, that's a really good question. That's a really tough one. I think it is, I'll just kind of phrase it in more criteria than an opportunity. I just think it's anything where it's a break from the past. Because in my skill set, that's why the foundation was such a difficult decision for me to make, is I've always been in large organizations, had lots of great colleagues to work with, had lots of support. I think jumping back into maybe a small business like I grew up in, where you don't really have any support. I mean, we did everything, and we worried about payroll, we worried about the revenue. I think that, to me, is a noble profession and job. Many of you run your own businesses. So that, to me, would be something where you don't have the safety net. And, so I just think the risk always comes from, at least for me, I always operate from skills that I've known in the known world. And when I go into an unknown world, the risk is go ahead, take the risk, you'll find support, you'll learn a lot, but it's darn uncomfortable. So anything that is uncomfortable, I would say would fall in that category. But it's a great question, and I think it causes all of us to think. Hi, Julie.
Phyllis, you ascended to the presidency of U.S. Bank of Washington right about the time I started my career, and you've been a terrific mentor for me along the ways, and as to so many others. So I'd like to thank you for that. One of the things that I remember about working with you is that you let me fail, and always were encouraging. And you mentioned failures along the way in your career and not wanting to. I hope someone else has another question, because I don't want to end on a negative note. But I was wondering, just for the sake of all of us, can you share a failure and how you overcame that in your career?
Okay,
not
thank
to put you on
Julie.
the spot.
No, it's fine. And I think that's, in sharing those, I think we learn from each other as well. And I can't imagine you ever failing. You were a star, so, and still are. But I'll just tell you one quick one that relates to U.S. Bank. It was a dumb decision. It was a dumb decision that I had to own, and that was, some of you may remember this, years ago, we fired all the full-time tellers because we thought it was a way to quickly cut costs and save money. And I'll tell you what, it was, I don't want to blame the consultants. We had to own the recommendation from the consultants, but we look back, and I stood up at an annual meeting of shareholders, and I just remember standing up there talking about our branches and getting booed. And I mean, if you have never been booed at an annual meeting, you haven't lived. But in any event, I really look back on that and say, somebody said, who made this decision? And I really had to step up to the microphone and say, I own that. I could have said, no, it was a dumb decision, we're going to reverse it. But if you remember, I think that was when you were there, it was just one of those dumb decisions. And I look back and thought I didn't have alternatives, I just went along, and it wasn't a great business decision at all. So that's just an example. I mean, there's so many mistakes, I could keep you up here all day. But on the other hand, I think the important thing is to go back, say, what did I learn, how do I correct course, and how do we not do something dumb like that again? Thank you.
Seattle Rotary Online is made possible in part by a grant from First Choice Health, working with the Washington Health Information Collaborative to use technology to bring better health care to patients throughout the Pacific Northwest. First Choice Health.